4 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And many of these calls to action relate to our justice system. They speak to the need to create fundamental change to ensure that true justice and equity for Indigenous people actually exists. And amongst them is Call to Action 50. Call to Action 50 calls upon the government to collaborate with Indigenous peoples to revitalize their legal systems and to fund Indigenous law institutes for the development, use, and understanding of Indigenous laws in accordance with the unique cultures of Indigenous peoples in Canada. Dans le budget 2019, nous avons prévu verser 10 millions de dollars en 5 ans pour appuyer des initiatives de droits autochtones partout au pays, dans le cadre du programme juridique de partenariat et d'innovation. Un programme mis en place afin d'améliorer l'accès à la justice et s'attaquer aux nouveaux enjeux du système de justice canadien. The first round of funding began with $500,000 in 2019-20. In August 2019, the Department of Justice opened a call for proposals for a second round of funding. It sought projects that support the revitalization of Indigenous law in all regions of Canada involving First Nations, Inuit, and Métis legal traditions. On May 17th, our government announced funding of almost $9.5 million for 21 projects across the country. Today, I am pleased to highlight one of these projects. With funding of $474,000 over 4 years, the Yellowknives Dene First Nation will work to establish the legal and governance infrastructure needed to shift to an Indigenous Dene system of law and governance. The Yellowknives Dene First Nation Rebuilding Project will involve working with Dene knowledge holders to record and distill traditional knowledge on laws, governance, and legal traditions. It will also involve developing a governance framework, including the legislative drafting needed to shift to a traditional system of law and government. With this new framework, rooted in traditional knowledge, the Yellowknives Dene First Nation plans to develop a constitution to formally recognize its self-governance. We're confident that this kind of funding will help make a real difference for your community, Chief Sangris, as you take on the sometimes challenging but important work of revitalizing your legal systems. Today's announcement is one of a number of concrete actions we're taking to advance reconciliation. We recently reached a significant milestone in our work with the royal assent on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. We now have a roadmap to advance the implementation of the declaration at the federal level. It's our intention to do this collaborative work and to focus on supporting Indigenous peoples in exercising the right to self-determination. La déclaration traite également des objectifs de l'appel à l'action numéro 50 et du droit des peuples autochtones de maintenir leurs institutions juridiques distinctes. And will continue to work with partners at Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs in negotiations for administration of justice agreements with a number of Indigenous communities. This responds directly to Call to Action 42 for federal and provincial governments to recognize and implement Aboriginal justice systems. In Budget 2021, the Government of Canada announced investments of $18 million over 5 years and $4 million ongoing to revive the Law Commission of Canada. This will support, amongst other things, the work to address systemic barriers in the justice system, including multiple barriers faced by Indigenous peoples. The funding we are announcing today will add to our reconciliation effort to support Indigenous communities and to build a new path forward that focuses on the needs of diverse peoples and communities. And as I've highlighted previously, this is very important to me personally, as well as important to my ministry and my government. I, for many years, taught in a law faculty and struggled in teaching property law in Canada, both in the civil law and common law tradition, to incorporate the understandings of Indigenous normative systems long before it became a current subject of discussion. And I would argue we are moving too slowly in this regard. these legal traditions, these legal systems have existed within the cultural context of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities across Canada. They've existed since time immemorial, and they are the most appropriate way to govern so much of what Indigenous peoples do, particularly with in their relationships with each other and with the land. And so this is an empowering moment, and I look forward to more of these kinds of initiatives as we move forward. So thank you very much. Merci. Thank you. Merci. And I now turn it over to Chief Sangris to say a few words.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Good afternoon, everybody. It's afternoon here. Are we still on?
Yep, go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank MP McLeod, the minister, for giving us the Yellowknives Dene First Nation support for this rebuilding projects of our system. We have a different kind of a system where our main language is Willowday language. When we're trying to, revitalize and we're trying to get our language recognized, which one of the 11 official languages of NWT. But in order to do that, we need to show, that we need to do the research and the support of the community, and I think this goes in line with that. And I'm truly honored to be one of the First Nations to lead this rebuilding project for the governance of the governance structure of the First Nations. For so long, we have been colonized on colonialism system where we have to follow everybody else's rules. But our ancestors have always set the law for us as a Dene law, and we follow that. And these, as we come, as you know, we're in the negotiations, and in tune with that, we're trying to set up a governance system in line with our, traditional and cultural system of law of justice in the community. And it's going to go a long way in trying to finalize that. And one of the things that we have to do is have to give the elders some involved in all this. And I think it's a good thing that we're doing, and I think that it's going to go a long ways into setting up a system of how we used to govern, and not the governance being imposed upon us. One of the main elements of our negotiations is the governance structure, how we're going to govern ourselves in the Quechua territory. So it's in tune with what we're trying to achieve, and the Yellowknives Dene First Nations is leading the way on how we set up our governance system. And based on the knowledge of the elders, we as Dene people have always had thank you. Before first contact, Dene people have always had a system, a justice system to govern themselves, and I think it's something that we, as First Nations, going to incorporate into our agreement, because we're negotiating based on the treaty implementation of 1900. So, and one of the ways that we have to govern is to say that we have to govern ourselves in a way that our ancestors have always governed themselves, and I think it's a good tune to turn towards that element of the system that we wanted to use for future generations. And it's taken a long time because one of the things that we have to do is incorporate the Willowdale language into the system, and along with other community language system in the Quechua. So it's something that we have to look at. And all these years of the funding announcement today will create a model and contribute to the movement of other First Nations, that are transcend to their self-government by establishing some sort of a blueprint for practicing and recognizing the governance law in their Indigenous traditions. So I think it's I'd like to thank the minister and for his hard work, and Michael McLeod MP for doing all the footwork. And we wish we had more MPs than just one, so it'd be twice as fast. But Michael could cover only so much ground in a day. I found out because the other chief from Yellowknives on election mode, so I have to do all the work, and it's twice as hard, twice as. So and then I like to thank everybody involved, and coming from from the heart of Yellowknives Dene. We're trying to move forward with negotiations and incorporating this law, incorporating this system of justice is really important to our people. And I think that we if we achieve this, we're going to move a long way, and the other First Nations got follow suit. Masicho.
Thank you very much, Chief Sangris. And now we will begin the question and answer period with the media. Juste un petit rappel, si vous êtes des médias, s'il te plaît, utilisez la fonction lever la main ou étoile 9 pour demander votre question. For the media, just a reminder, please use the raised hand function or *6 on your phone if you would like to ask a question. We will start with Tom Cardoso, Global News. Go ahead.
Hi, Minister Lametti. This is Tom Cardoso with the Globe and Mail. How are you today? Good.
I am well, Tom. Thank you. I'll take myself off mute.
Great. Sorry about that. I always forget that there's a muting thing. So, Minister Lametti, the Globe and Mail reported this weekend that the Catholic Church had billions of dollars in assets, despite the fact that it had not paid its entire residential school settlement commitments. In a story this morning, Indigenous leaders called for a review of the settlement agreement. Will the government revisit the agreement?
Thank you, Tom, for that question. Let me begin by saying that I'm a practicing Catholic, and I am so ashamed about the way the Catholic Church has handled this. We, as a government, as Minister of Justice, we will continue to work with Indigenous peoples as information comes forward, and we'll try to do our best to move this file forward in a positive way. And I won't comment specifically about that at this moment.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, Tom? Next we will go. Oh, yep, go ahead.
Sorry. Yes. One question that has come up from some of the Indigenous leaders I've spoken with is the idea that perhaps even beyond simply revisiting the agreement, a third party should be appointed to investigate these matters. National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Roseanne Archibald, told me that she's pushing for a special rapporteur of some sorts. Do you have any comment on that?
I've worked closely over the past number of weeks with Indigenous leadership across Canada both at the national level, regional level, and also at the level of the individual communities affected. We, as I said in my prepared remarks, we will move forward with something that is Indigenous-led, that is survivor-centric, and that is culturally sensitive, working with communities, with Indigenous leadership, with provinces and territories, and with other implicated groups.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will move to Pascal. Please name your name of your organization.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, vas-y Pascal.
Merci. Pascal Gachette du journal Métro Montréal. Alors c'est une question pour Monsieur Lametti. Au niveau du département de la justice, c'est quoi le défi pour mettre sur papier des lois qui sont autochtones et surtout qui sont des fois, elles sont séculaires, elles ont des centaines d'années, elles sont parfois orales. Au niveau judiciaire, comment on fait pour les officialiser?
Ben, c'est une bonne question, Pascal, merci. Et ça touche évidemment l'annonce qu'on vient de faire aujourd'hui. Ce qu'on est en train de faire, c'est de réinvigorer les systèmes normatifs, les systèmes légaux autochtones. Et qui ont existé depuis plusieurs, depuis le début sur l'île des Tortues, ici où on vit. C'est une question de pluralisme juridique, donc de trouver l'espace pour des systèmes d'abord opérer et dans un deuxième temps coopérer, parce que la réponse va être plusieurs systèmes pourraient occuper même espace en même temps. C'est déjà le cas. Dans n'importe quel système juridique et dans le système juridique du Canada. Donc, le défi pour l'instant, c'est vraiment de réinvigorer les systèmes autochtones. Les traditions orales, des fois il y avait des traditions écrites, des traditions chantées, mais ce sont des systèmes qui fonctionnent encore, qui organisent les vies des communautés et des personnes, et de donc les laisser faire, de les laisser épanouir dans le système et de coexister avec d'autres systèmes juridiques qui se trouvent situés sur la même place.
Et ma deuxième question, ce serait plutôt pour voir quels sont les chantiers prioritaires. Donc, je ne sais pas, est-ce qu'il y a des thèmes au niveau des lois qui vont être étudiés? Est-ce qu'il y a des lois qui vont être étudiées prioritairement? Et surtout, comment on fait
pour les... OK, non, terminé, excusez-moi.
Comment on fait, en fait, je vais reprendre ma question. Quels sont les chantiers prioritaires au niveau des futures lois qui vont être étudiées? Et surtout, comment ça fonctionne? Comment on fait?
Ce qu'on a fait dans ce projet, on a laissé la possibilité des peuples autochtones de définir ce qu'ils voulaient faire eux-mêmes et donc de définir leurs priorités et de définir leur démarche, de définir leur partenariat. Donc, il y a certaines à travers le Canada qui sont entrées en partenariat avec les universités ou les instituts. Il y a d'autres qui sont plus axés sur le terrain, comme le projet d'aujourd'hui. Donc, c'est vraiment à un peuple à autodéterminer ce qu'il voudrait faire. Donc, pour l'instant, la démarche, c'est vraiment de laisser l'espace aux peuples autochtones eux-mêmes, de déterminer comment ils voudraient développer, identifier et encadrer leur système juridique.
Merci.
Mais c'est un premier pas, effectivement.
Bien reçu.
Merci. Est-ce qu'il y aura d'autres questions des médias? Are there any more questions? Please raise your hand. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions. Cela fait fin de la conférence de presse. Merci beaucoup à tous.
Merci. I'd like to say before we leave that Michael McLeod, Chief Sangris, is worth a handful of MPs. So you're good. You're good there.
Okay, I'll tell the rest of the people in the territories.
That's good. I hope you do that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for doing this, and it's going to come a long way in trying to revitalize our system and towards our negotiating, and hopefully we can finish the negotiations in the near future.
I look forward to coming up and visiting, seeing it
Yeah.
firsthand. Okay. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.